Welcome to the Atlantic Current. I'm Vince Martin from Wall Street, Maine. Here as always with Tull McAdoo from the Irish Politics newsletter. We are going to stick with current events today. Obviously, we have more news on the war in Iran. There's a stunning video from the White House, and we're going to end with a hugely controversial topic that nearly brought this podcast down. But first, Tull, we're going to talk about the most immediate global effect of the war in Iran, which is spiking energy prices worldwide.
Yes, Vince, welcome back to the show, folks, where we're trying to make sense of a world that's run by people who definitely shouldn't be trusted with matches, never mind massive super oil tankers. This week's continued nervous breakdown is the oil crisis. It's not that there's not enough of it, it's the fact that we can't transport it is the main question here, is the main issue, isn't it? They're having to take the most expensive and inconvenient routes possible to get around the world at the moment. It's driving insurance companies mad. It's driving logistics people mad. But most of all, it's going to drive consumers mad, Vince, because it's going to drive the price of everything right up through the roof. Everything. And look, from the outset, I'm not an economic historian, but I did look back at previous oil shocks and oil crisis. And after every other major oil crisis in, the 70s, 80s, 90s, even in the 20s and 30s, they were always followed by a pretty steep recession. And that's the danger territory that we're in at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. When we were talking yesterday, you predicted oil prices would clear 100. As we're recording this, I think it's at about 105. So you're now 2 for 2 on your financial calls. You've called a spike in oil and the top in gold. Congratulations, Tull.
Yes.
We are seeing global equity markets start to get pressure. Japan's stock market was down 5% on Monday. Korea was down 6%. Now, Korea's had some really nutty trading over the last couple months and even a couple years. So that one's a little bit of its own special case. But we do have people in the West talking now about stagflation, the big fear. And stagflation is where you get price inflation and no economic growth. The most famous example of that was in the 70s. And that, to your point, I'm not an economic historian either, but that stagflation of that period was closely associated with oil crises. And you can see why people are making that parallel, because two of the big crises that happened in the 70s, one was in 1973 over a war with Israel, the Yom Kippur War. And then 1979 was when this Islamic regime came to power in the revolution in Iran in the first place. So, yeah, it's worth noting, like, this is not just people complaining about prices at the pump. Oh, they're up 40 cents or whatever, and this is annoying. I think you're absolutely right in saying that there's real risk to the global economy right now, and we're seeing traders start to price that in.
Where's the price of gasoline, as you call it, in the United States at the moment, Vince?
It spiked over $3 a gallon. Varies by states owing to taxes and other factors, but pretty consistently over 3 and certain places over 4.
Okay, well, what's that in euros? So we're looking in euros at the moment. That's about €8 a gallon, $8 a gallon.
Yeah, so that's what almost almost $9 a gallon. Yeah,
yeah. So
there would be riots here if gas was $9 a gallon.
Yeah, but that's what we're paying.
Who did January 6th would be at the Capitol again in a week, no matter what Trump said.
That's what we're paying in Ireland at the moment, the equivalent to $8, $9.
Yeah.
Everything's up over €2 at the moment, in diesel particularly. And what the reason why is that because on a normal Monday, you're going to have 60 to 100 oil tankers in and out of the Strait of Hormuz. Okay. Yeah. It's down to less than 10 now over a 24-hour period. And that's our problem at the moment. Now, the last time oil was over $100 a barrel was in 2022, and that was obviously the Russian invasion of Ukraine. People are talking about getting to levels near what they were in 2007 before the massive crash, which at the time went to $147 a barrel, if my memory serves me correctly. And that adjusted for inflation, that's about $210, $220 a barrel. So the problem at the moment is that there seems to be a bit of price gouging going on in Ireland. We're not sure to what extent and stuff like that, but I mean, there are these accusations, and I see you have a skeptical look on your face there when I say price gouging, Vince. So,
well, I'll let you make your case.
And look, not only that, we get most of our petrol from the North Sea anyway. Would you believe? Or like very little of what's going through the Strait of Hormuz arrives in Ireland by any stretch of any imagination. So So there's a little bit of a sick feeling going on here at the moment. We feel like we're being ripped off, but you have a skeptical look on your face. So I want you to come in there and tell me why you look skeptical.
Well, I'm kind of a classic economics guy, so I've kind of always argued that price gouging doesn't really happen, and we have these debates from time to time when oil spikes here. People in America say the same thing, and one of the big arguments against price gouging in gasoline, in particular, is that all these stations could just compete on price. There's no product in the world whose price is advertised the way gasoline or petrol is. There's no other stores that have a huge sign right at the street telling you how much their main product costs. So, if you do run a station, you know what every station in town is doing, and ostensibly you could cut it down. And we have a couple publicly traded gasoline station owners here in the U.S., so you can see their earnings. This one called Casey's, which is based out of the Midwest, they make about 40 cents a gallon. So actually, most of the money that they make is really not on gas. It's on the food and the snacks and the drink.
Yeah.
And like Circle K in Ireland makes the greatest chicken and stuffing sandwich in the world. I've legitimately, when we visit, that's like on my to-do list. I have to go get at least one chicken and stuffing sandwich from Circle K. So this part's a little personal too, that you're insulting the greatest sandwich maker in the world. But, and I will give you this, in the US at least, there are a lot of studies that say when prices spike higher, the gas stations move really, really fast. I mean, they're paying overtime to get the kid up there changing the numbers. And when they come back down, all of a sudden, some of the gas station owners seem to kind of be on vacation or they're taking a day off. So it does, on the way back down, I will grant you that there is actual economic evidence that they are a lot slower to pull the prices back down.
Yes, and there's plenty of that documentary evidence as well in Ireland.
Yeah.
I know you don't believe in the theory of price gouging as such, Vincent, but at one stage on Saturday, there was a guy in Clonmel in County Tipperary. Have you ever been to Clonmel, Vince?
We have not, no. I do want to go to, yeah.
Yeah, it's a long road to Tipperary and all that, but I mean, I'd give Clonmel a miss, to be perfectly honest. There's nothing there but cows and pearls, basically. It's the kind of place where the men are men and the sheep are nervous, as I like to say.
So I would just point out that there's only 32 counties in Ireland, and we're not quite that big podcast yet. So let's try not to alienate entire swaths of our listenership, please.
Yes, it wouldn't be Tull if he wasn't alienating people, I'm sure.
That's true. That's been a headwind to our growth from the jump.
Yeah, so the long and short of it, this guy was documenting. He stood outside the petrol station on Saturday for what seems to be all afternoon, and he documented 4 times the price of petrol went up in the space of 6 or 7 hours.
Okay, that's impressive. I'll grant that.
And he, in fairness to him, he posted online. He posted the receipts. He posted the pictures. He posted everything. Like, there is some price gouging going on, obviously, because Circle K, it's up at $2.14, $2.15 a litre in some parts of the country, and other petrol stations are still hovering around. They have jumped in prices. They're like $1.80, $1.90, but they haven't jumped as much as some of those Circle K garages. I can tell you that much. So,
well, they got to pay for the high quality chicken in their sandwiches. So again,
yeah,
I'm not criticizing Circle K, but look, and I'm sure there's probably a little bit of that. I'm sitting here like a classic American, talking about my knowledge of how petrol stations in rural Ireland are run. But the idea that the petrol stations are the problem here, I do think you're shooting the messenger here. When you should be, I was going to say when you should be shooting Donald Trump, but I think, yeah, we're going to avoid that one, everybody. Yeah, that'll get on social media. I'll be raising my kid in some booby-trapped holler in West Virginia for the next 20 years. So, yeah, I sympathize. I sympathize on both sides. Let me put it that way.
The problem here is that the cost of living crisis is going on as well in Ireland at the moment.
Yeah, I get that. Right.
I'm not saying all petrol station owners should be hung, drawn, and quartered. Only some of them, of course. And we can pick them at random. That makes it better. But this cost of living crisis, and excuse the pun, is adding petrol to the fire, so to speak.
Yeah.
And speaking of petrol and fire, in Iran over the last few days, acid rain was literally falling all over Tehran because Israel went off and bombed a load of oil refineries, and it's taken to the skies, and it's literally raining acid rain, petrol down on the streets of Iran at the moment. So Trump doesn't have an off-ramp here, okay?
Yeah.
No, he said also that he's seeking unconditional surrender from the Iranian regime. Now, any good leader will never, ever talk down the opposition as badly. You see it in politics, you see it in sports, they had an off day, we trained really well. He's demanding something from a regime that they're incapable of giving him, I think, because that regime is so decentralized. I said last week they had layers. It's decentralized. It's like one of those weirdo crypto tokens. It's incredibly it's incredibly decentralized.
Right.
So you have loads of units operating independently of each other. Even if one faction came out and said, yeah, we're going to surrender, there could be 20 or 30 different factions within the regime that are not going to surrender.
I don't entirely understand that public statement either. I'm sure his supporters and maybe he himself will think, oh, this is his negotiating thing, right? He comes out, we need unconditional surrender. And that's how he moves the window for negotiations and all this stuff. But as we said before, these are not real estate deals. And the Iranian regime, and particularly the Revolutionary Guards, are not people who you're trying to license a hotel from.
No, and they have nothing to lose. And again,
Right.
if history shows us anything, regimes that have nothing to lose behave very erratically and very unpredictably. Okay, you go think Germany, World War II, Japan, World War II, regimes, when they start to topple, when they start to tether, they start to behave very erratically, and they're doing the only thing they can do to beat Trump and the Western democracies over the head with is close the straits and strangle us economically. So I saw some wit say there yesterday that it took the United States 20 years to replace the Taliban with the Taliban in Afghanistan, and it took them 9 days to swap one Khomeini for another Khomeini.
That's well done. Yeah, for listeners who have not caught up, we are recording this on Monday, so that news came out. The son of the former Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei named the new supreme leader. We talked about that before, that there was some reporting in that direction, and we also talked about the fact that the reporting has said that the late Ayatollah, his predecessor and his father, did not want his son named as the leader because this Islamic revolution overthrew a monarchic dynasty. And he said, that he didn't want to create another one, which is kind of interesting because the Iranian diaspora, some of them are still coalescing around Pahlavi, who is the son of the Shah that was overthrown. They want him back. So there is a little bit of European royalty feel to this internecine dispute. But
now, everything I've read about Khomeini the Younger, let's call him, would seem to indicate that his father was actually more of a moderate guy than he is, and this fella is the real deal bad guy, Islamo-fascist, theocracy believing. He believes he's a successor to some holy man, and he's ultimately a very bad guy and very, very unpredictable, and he makes his father look like a very safe pair of hands compared to him. So
that does seem to be the case. According to reporting, was pretty heavily involved in the recent crackdown on protesters and the executions. He was a part of the Revolutionary Guard during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s. That was the one, for people who aren't familiar with American history, where America took Iraq's side and armed Iraq in that war before we switched sides a couple years later. And at the very least, you don't really need too much reporting to understand the signal that they're sending by choosing Khamenei's son as a successor, which is, no, we're not negotiating. No way are we doing some unconditional surrendering stuff. We're staying the course. And so now, certainly no time soon does it seem like Iran is going to provide Trump an off-ramp. So it's just going to be a matter of if he wants to take it. And that's part of why this discussion about oil prices and the like matters beyond pump prices. Is in America, we have affordability concerns too. And we're already having political pundits here saying, how long can Trump let Americans, pay these elevated prices and, deal with the inflation that oil is going to cause and plastic and shipping and everything else when we have midterms coming up in 8 months.
And I don't see how Trump wins this unless he sends troops in. Okay. And that is a red line. I think that's a red line for a lot of Americans, isn't it?
It remains a red line as far as I can tell. I mean, we've talked about that before. And I think his supporters can get behind this because it looks militarily like we're winning. We've had 7 casualties. There's a way to rationalize it. But boots on the ground does seem like a red line. But look, A lot of people have said for 10 years, oh, this is a red line for his supporters. I mean, January 6th, a lot of his supporters say, yeah, I'm done. They were back in like 3 weeks. So I don't really know quite the answer on that one. But I would tend to agree with you with the caveat that we have seen versions of this movie before.
Let me ask you something there, Vince, about political calculations. Is oil prices going to play a big deal in politics in America coming up?
For now, I think Trump can probably get away with it. It's basically like kind of how many times do people fill up? You know, how many times do people have to fill their gas tanks at this price? You know, Trump has said publicly, they asked him about this, and he goes, look, if they rise, they rise.
That sounds like Ivan Drago in Rocky 4 or 5 or something, wasn't it? If they rise, they rise. Yeah. Oh, God, right?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a minute, about how this administration just keeps leaning into playing the villain. But he said it's a price to pay, and I think people will understand that for a short time. You know, but economic self-interest motivates a lot of voters, and you know, I think their position already is weak in front of the midterms. And so I think he has a little bit of time, but probably not that much. The one thing that concerns me, if you're hoping this ends, is that on this topic, Trump probably thinks that he can fix it. Because before the war, he was talking about how gasoline was down below $2 per gallon, which it wasn't, but he was talking about how the prices were at multi-year lows. That part was true. And he believes it's because of his administration's policies. As we're learning here, that's not really how it works. Oil is a pretty global market. Even the American president doesn't have quite the effect that we like to think. But I think part of the issue is he believes if they go up, he can fix it. He'll just call the U.S. oil and gas CEOs into the White House. He'll yell at them, tell them to start drilling. They'll start drilling a ton. Prices will go back down and everybody will be happy. I think this is a problem that he thinks he can fix, even though I don't think that it is. Not directly, not just with supply and demand stuff.
Well, no, because any prolonged shutdown of the Straits is just going to lead to more pain anyway. And for things have to come back online, and these things have to be ramped up again and stuff like that. Now, the doom merchants are out in force at the moment, and they're predicting anything up to $200 for the price of a barrel of oil.
Yeah.
And what that would do then, and it's not like me to be all doom and gloom, is it, Vince? That would send us into a crash similar to 1929, according to the smart people who have Nobel Prizes in economics and this kind of thing. Trump doesn't have a plan. We know he doesn't have a plan. The world knows he doesn't have a plan. So I'm not sure where we actually go from here for the world economy or for Trump's politics, to be perfectly honest. I mean, you kind of hope he'll see some sense, but he's a wrecking ball. He doesn't see any sense most of the time. He just does Trump. Goes in, wrecks the place, busts things up and walks away. So you spoke before in the last podcast about how you break it, you own it.
Yeah, the Colin Powell line. Yeah.
He doesn't care about any of that.
No, it's not a consideration. And with all due respect to listeners in Ireland and Europe, no, I don't think he really cares what the price of gas or anything else is on the continent. You know, again, he's going to pay attention to the American prices. But again, I think he really believes he can fix that. He thinks he can fix everything else. I don't see why that would be an exception. Or Iran's going to come around in a couple of days. And his Secretary of Energy said this weekend, which may be a reasonable point in the administration's favor, that we have already degraded Iran's weapons capabilities enough that the Strait's going to reopen in a few weeks, just because Iran's not going to have the capability to be launching missiles and drones that, over that way. Now, whether that's true or not, we'll see. You're talking about global economic catastrophe. There's a lot of evidence that the global economy, and in particular the U.S. economy, is not nearly as strong as the headline numbers suggest, that there's some real weakness and some real worry under, particularly for what you might kind of say, like kind of middle class down. So just saying, we'll come back in a month or so and everything will just be back to normal. I'm not sure, man. You're taking a risk that month makes consumers pull back, and then you add on the volatility from all these tariffs and stuff, and you can see how a domino effect starts heading in the wrong direction.
So when the price of oil goes up like it's doing now, it's yo-yoing here in front of me. It's like, you're getting air sickness looking at it. Yeah. It doesn't stay a geolocated problem in, India or parts of Europe and stuff like that. It affects the whole world. And I'm sure the smart people that listen to our podcast know this, but we have to tell them anyway. And if Europe can't buy anything, then, we're not buying stuff off China. We're not buying off the United States. We're not buying stuff off each other. there's a knock-on effect worldwide. The other doomsday scenarios that nobody's getting any oil at all. Strategic reserves run out across Europe and people start freezing to death. Businesses can't power their industries. They'll grind to a halt. And again, that'll have a snowball or cascading effect. That's a serious doomsday scenario. But apparently the G7 have come out this afternoon and said they have, 400 million barrels of strategic reserve knocking around or something like that. And that should help ease prices. So let's see what the G7 do.
Yeah, well, the fact that they're talking about it tells you it's serious, right? Governments don't talk about their strategic petroleum reserves over something that lasts a couple of days. When oil traders are just having a little bit of fun. So, yeah, that in and of itself is noteworthy. Let me give you kind of the devil's advocate / American conservative response to what you just said. Doesn't that risk highlight that Europe as a whole has had an energy policy that's left it vulnerable? I mean, that's been a criticism from a lot of American conservatives that, Europe has been too woke, of course, and, global warming and environmental concerns and clean air worries and all this stuff. And you guys have squandered your own energy, your own reserves in places like the North Sea. And as a result, now you guys are at the whim of a global market in a way that you wouldn't have to be otherwise. That's the right-wing explanation. Do you think there's any truth to that?
There is some truth to it, yes, of course.
Okay.
The United Kingdom have done something with their North Sea oil and they're not able to extrapolate its full benefits for their own society and
right.
European society, should be said. France will be okay. France are mostly nuclear powered. Their portion of their energy that's powered by nuclear power is the highest in the world, I think. Germany's in trouble. They shut down all their nuclear power plants a couple of years ago. We're heavily reliant on Russian gas imports. Ireland, now, let's get to Ireland. Ireland is spending, according to an economist I heard on RTE radio last week, $1 million an hour, Vince, on gas or petrol, whatever you're calling it yourself. And any kind of oil shock or energy crisis will kick us in the nuts pretty badly. So, and as I said earlier, we import very little from the Gulf regions, but we're so tied into, global finance markets, stuff like that. We're paying top dollar for what we're getting.
Right.
We're the most fossil fuel reliant country in Western Europe. There's a big debate on at the moment. If you're right here, Ireland had a very simple solution to this oil crisis. Can you guess what that might be, Vincent? Our solution?
Building nuclear?
No, we never build nuclear ever because, NIMBYism, you have that in the United States as well.
Of course, yeah.
We have to do a nuclear episode as well, I think, but we'll never build nuclear because of NIMBYism, and because of NIMBYism also, we'll never build wind power.
Yeah, of course. That was an ezy answer.
Yeah, I went up the road and down the road a long way to get to the wind power, but we have the Atlantic Ocean in front of us.
Right.
We're surrounded by water. We could put as many wind turbines as we want into our seabeds, but we can't build anything in Ireland at the moment, which is another episode for a podcast also.
Yeah.
I know there's something else here, okay? There's about 350,000 people in arrears on their electricity bills in Ireland at the moment, okay? Now, we're a population of 5 million people. So 350,000 homes is a lot of people in arrears. And we already have some of the highest energy bills in the world already. And it's going to get much worse. We're cutting off our noses to spite our faces and all that. We won't build the wind turbines because, we can't have a bit of an eyesore and all that kind of jazz. But equally, we're going to pay for this in our pockets also. People are giving out, the energy prices are so expensive. What are we doing? What are we at? These same people will be out saying, you can't build wind turbines.
Right.
They're talking out of both sides of their mouth. They're having their cake and eating it. If you have 350,000 people struggling to pay their electricity bills at the moment and energy prices continue to rise, that number is going to rise also. And if you have that many people delinquent on their energy bills, there's only a matter of time before some company somewhere takes a hit and goes bang, doesn't it? Yeah, I mean, the economics of that will say, some companies must be on very shaky financial ground if that's the case.
Yeah, so, for sure.
The government are going to come under fierce pressure to do something because the government always has to do something, and that always ends well, doesn't it? That there's been called to cut taxes, which will be the usual one, to to reduce their tax take on what to take from the energy markets and all that. So this story has a way to go in Ireland yet. You think it has a lot more to go in the United States before it really affects you, do you think, Vince?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little while. Given how polarized we are, that has to start hitting Trump supporters in their pocketbook for long enough and hard enough that they start paying attention and they start getting upset when Trump says, oh, it's just the price to pay for doing this. And yeah, I think we are a little bit a ways from there.
So, Vincent, staying with Iran, but pivoting away from energy or lack of, the White House put out a video the other day, and it says justice the American way. And do you want to give us talk us through what was going on there?
Oh man, I just really do not. Yeah, a movie trailer. I mean, it kind of basically set to just this god awful techno beat. I know that's redundant. Yeah, interspersed with movie clips and videos of the U.S. blowing up targets in Iran. Yeah, it kind of rocketed around social media and stuff. I'm sure many listeners
62.4 million people have viewed it so far. 62.4 million videos.
Yeah, that's great. It's rough, man. And I'll be honest, I really can't remember being quite that ashamed as an American. And I apologize to overseas listeners, some of whom probably want to throw their phone across the room hearing me say that.
Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, you guys bomb the hell out of everyone. You're fine with that. But, some Twitter video sets you over the edge. But in all seriousness, like we've talked about this with Iran a little bit. I don't agree with what they're doing, but I can see the logic of why they're doing it. I really can. I know a lot of listeners still think it's wrong and stupid. And again, we've talked about the dangers of the secondary effects, but look, if someone says this is a repressive regime at a weak point, they've been a problem for close to half the century, we can take them out now. It helps our interests. It helps their citizenry. Again, I don't agree with it. If someone makes that case, I can have a conversation with them. I don't think that they're just some useless, evil warmonger. Somebody who watches this video and thinks, oh, yeah, that's awesome. I don't think I can have a conversation with that person. The comments are all over it that, they make war seem like a video game. It's completely disrespectful to kind of the solemnity of war, to the fact that almost 200 school children died in that bombing, which increasingly looks like that was done by either the U.S. or Israel, not Iran.
It was, yes. And it was AI as well, wrongly targeted. It used to be an old military site about 20 years ago, and AI wrongly targeted. So that's what happened there.
Wouldn't surprise me. So the nature of it, it's just so gross. It's just unconscionable. And that was vulgar. Really vulgar. Yeah, is an understatement. And I don't know if you want to talk about some of the characters in there.
I mean, Walter White from Breaking Bad.
Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, if you're not familiar, Breaking Bad is an unbelievable show, but Walter White is the protagonist who is a chemistry teacher who starts making the finest crystal methamphetamine. He is probably not someone we want representing America in this thing.
In the series Breaking Bad, he poisoned children, murdered people, destroyed his family. Yeah. I mean, he's an all-around bad guy. So
yeah, he's not as bad as the Sith Lord who is in there, which is really unreal.
There was horror and outrage expressed here in Ireland. People couldn't believe it. War is not a movie scene, So it was crass, it was vulgar, it was all the terrible things in the world. I couldn't get over it. There was genuine outrage over it. And every year the Taoiseach of Ireland, the Prime Minister, goes to visit the White House, hands over the bowl of shamrock for a bit of paddy whackery. And people just really do not want him to go to the White House. And part of me, myself, thinks, no, he shouldn't go to the White House either. But then the real politics side of me kicks in and says, he's going to have to go. If he doesn't go, we could find ourselves on the receiving end of getting invaded ourselves because he's so unpredictable.
Right. You have to go. Otherwise, you have to spend your evenings watching Truth Social for some post at, 5 a.m. Dublin time. 5 a.m. West Cork time.
Yeah.
I'm tariffing Ireland 78%. Because the Taoiseach didn't show up. But the other thing, too, is we've talked about this administration, they act like soft power is just like this woke thing that liberals made up, like not something that's been a part of geopolitics for literally 6,000 years. This is on the official White House account. That's who sent this thing out. Like, it's unbelievable. again, like soft power, like your reputation matters. You are ostensibly executing this war to create stability in the Middle East. If that's your goal, here's what I would not do. I would not have the White House account send out a video that literally, this is not exaggeration, literally could be used in online recruitment efforts for your enemies.
Yeah, quite the insight into the minds of the people in charge in the American military at the moment. Trump and Hegseth, particularly, war just one big movie scene to be acted out. And
yeah,
I saw dead American soldiers coming off a plane this morning, and that's when it's going to start hitting home. Once you see the coffins draped in the Star Spangled Banner being loaded off planes, people that'll focus the mind a little bit, won't it, into what Trump is up there with his stupid videos.
I think public opinion at this point is just so hardened that it's going to take something really, outside current expectations to change it. People who are against it, I don't think are going to come around. The people who are for it, there was a poll by NBC News. We've talked a little bit about how, there's a split in MAGA over this, and a lot of people in his base were against it, and they were against the strikes last year. NBC News poll came out, said that people who said that they were aligned with MAGA were 90% in favor.
Okay.
And this is where I'm supposed to go, yeah, it's no surprise. They always rally behind it. I was stunned by that figure, absolutely stunned that it went that high, that fast. And
right.
Let's give a couple caveats. One, other polls haven't been quite that aggressive. And I think also the polarization here is so much that I bet, like, if you're a Trump supporter and NBC is one of the 4 broadcast networks here. A lot of them probably don't want to tell NBC News like that they're against it, even if they were, just because they think they're talking to some from woke liberal media. So let's give that figure a bit of a grain of salt. But you can say with some certainty is that the predictions last weekend that, this might split the Trump base. He might lose supporters over this. As I joked before, Trump is right. They're going to support him whether he shoots someone on Fifth Avenue or whether he shoots someone in the Middle East. Doesn't matter. They're going to support him. I have been a little bit surprised that the rank and file have come around so quickly, at least if you believe the polling.
Yeah, look, hundreds of people are dead. 145 children, girls. 6 Americans are dead. Countless other American servicemen and women are over there serving their country on the whims of a narcissist at the moment. It's not a video game. It's not a meme. And it's not like some other chance to own the libs or whatever the case may be, Vince.
Yeah.
It's a war, and they've turned it into a meme.
This isn't really new for Hegseth. He has seen combat. He got 2 Bronze Stars in Iraq and Afghanistan. But even in that context, his entire career, particularly after the military, he's kind of given this idea, this sense of the teenager playing soldier. He said in his own book that he had soldiers under his command in the Middle East, that he told them to ignore legal advice on rules of engagement, very publicly push for pardons of soldiers who were convicted of war crimes by U.S. military courts under what's known as the UCMJ. He's criticized the military himself. So there are a lot of people who are veterans who are experienced in the military who are dismayed by this, but kind of not necessarily surprised.
And now they've probably been beaten to submission because they're afraid to open their mouths in case they get sacked by Hegseth and Trump, aren't they?
I'm sure there's a lot of that in the DOW, as it's now called. Again, he's renamed the Department of Defense, Department of War. And yeah, I'm sure they're down. And he's out giving press conferences with all these kind of cartoonish, stereotypical phrases about how we're raining fire from the sky and all these kind of weird metaphors. Like, again, his press conferences don't sound terribly different from the videos. And there are a lot of people who were formerly in the military, and to your point, no doubt currently in the military, who are really discomfited by his attitude towards this as something that is something to be excited about rather than executed with kind of a solemn duty.
Okay, so it sounds like if the Trump regime ever falls itself, that the court cases that come afterwards are going to be just as interesting.
Yeah. I mean, you hear those fantasies from people on the left, right? Like if the fever ever breaks, Nuremberg comparisons and stuff. Again, I'm not making those comparisons because for the same reason we didn't make any jokes about shooting Donald Trump. I'm I don't want to live in a booby-trapped dollar, but yeah, you have heard that from time to time. And let's just have one more point here. The fact that we're having this discussion over Pete Hegseth is only because the president of the United States hired him to run the United States military because he liked watching him on television.
Yeah.
We do kind of forget like just how crazy this 10 years are because everything's crazy. And so it's the things that jump out are things that are crazy in comparison. It's worth taking a step back as we're talking about the global effect of this war, understanding that, the history of the man in charge of militarily prosecuting that war. He was a television host like a couple years ago. And he wasn't even like a famous television host. He was on the weekends when no one was watching. It's really incredible. Again, a lot of listeners thinking American getting indignant over a Twitter video after our history. I'm sure that they're frustrated by that. But I do think that this matters, and it is telling. It's reflective of the attitude, as you say. One of their previous tweets, it wasn't quite this grotesque, but they had another one of showing clips of strikes and things like that, and it was called Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue. And I'm assuming Irish listeners don't know this, but Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue was a god-awful country song that was released right after 9/11.
Who sang it?
And a guy named Toby Keith, who was quite a big star at the time. He passed a couple years ago. And the refrain is, it's like Uncle Sam put your name at the top of his list and the Statue of Liberty started shaking her fist. But it's basically a revenge anthem. Looking back, you're like, oh, God, that's awful. But in the weeks after 9/11, I think that emotion was the least understandable. People were hurt and angry. And look, I was in Manhattan on September 11th. I was hurt and angry. So this is not that. This is just war porn from a country that's just sort of, there's almost a sense that we're like kind of like trying to find a reason. Again, we've been attacked by Iran, but this is not some festering wound that has been darkening the American psyche for the last 20 years.
Yes, and it struck me, Vincent, it was like if you put a load of teenage boys into a room and asked them to make a war video, that's what they'd do.
Yeah.
And to your point about it not being an open, festering wound with Iran, I think this is going to, blow up on the United States when at least expect it. The repercussions of this war are going to be felt for a long, long time. And
that's always the history, right?
The history of this shows that it blows up every time, literally, figuratively, all over the place. People die. And people die in the United States because of these actions. Also,
right.
It's so. This is a way to go yet, Vincent. This is a long, long way to go. It's episode 944 of the Atlantic Current podcast, and Trump is rampaging around the Middle East and calling it peace.
Yeah.
So
he's in his fourth term.
He's in his fourth term. Yes,
we're doing the podcast just guzzling Jameson. Can't even handle it anymore.
You're living in West Cork with me. And you've had to escape the United States. Things have got so bad. You've been talking trash about Trump too much, and the FBI threw you out of the country. So
that's probably that's the path we're on. Good times. I can't wait. Yeah, it's funny. You have this view of the future where we've done 900 episodes because we are going to come to a hugely controversial topic, not in the sense of global politics, but in the sense of the two presenters of this podcast. So March 11th, for me, is the 6th anniversary of when the COVID pandemic became real. And we talked in the sport episode about my love for the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Oklahoma City Thunder were playing in a game on the night of March 11th, 2020. And as they were literally about to start the game, the arena's full, there's 20,000 people. A team official comes running out and says that one of the players on one of the teams who was back at the hotel sick had tested positive for COVID.
Right. And
they canceled the game. Within, I think, like 90 minutes of that happening, the National Basketball Association, the Professional Basketball League, they've canceled the entire season. And this is the point where everybody goes, oh. So since it was a 6-year anniversary, I thought that COVID was going to be a good topic for this weekend. And Tull, you did not. Do you want to read for our audience what your message to me was?
I kind of think COVID is not interesting enough right now. I actually think no one would listen to a podcast about COVID because the subject is still very toxic here. I mean, if you put COVID in a tweet or a Facebook post, you're going to get out. It's just madness.
Yeah. So yeah, you said it was very toxic, and you said I don't think people want to be reminded of it. And so I think the compromise we're going to try here, we're going to talk about the fact that people don't want to talk about it, because I think that's actually really fascinating. And I think you're actually right on that. So we had one debate during the 2024 presidential election. The pandemic came up once from Trump talking about all his accomplishments, and he had like 2 sentences about what a great job he did during the pandemic. It is really wild. I think that people don't want to talk about it. People just want to forget that it ever happened, right?
Well, there's a generation of teenagers who have been mentally stunted by their lack of interaction in schools and things like that, and I think for a start, everybody's kind of tired. Everybody, we had years of daily case numbers, graphs that looked like cardiograms, and politicians explaining the science, politicians explaining science. I'm like, lads, get off the stage. But I mean, in Ireland, we did take a very scientific-led approach, and the politicians, in time COVID was mentioned, politicians go ask the scientist, point to the scientist in their apartment, go talk to that guy.
Right.
Pandemic fatigue.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it was. And I think there's going to be whole books on psychology written about what COVID did and did not do to people,
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, it hugely affected American politics, for sure. We did the same thing. Oh, ask a scientist. The famous phrase here, trust the science. And there's just a lot of people say, well, the scientists were either wrong or lying. And that accelerated a lot of changes and a lot of distrust in institutions.
Yeah, not to be trivial about it either. Like, people were getting phone calls saying, your mother's dying, but you can't visit her. They were watching their parents die on FaceTime or something,
Yeah.
And while government press conferences were assuring them everything was under control, when it wasn't really. Nobody knew what was happening. Those visions from Italy were beamed around the world, people dying in corridors. And I think there's a collective trauma there, kind of PTSD going on, and people just want to forget about it. They don't want to deal with it,
Yeah. PTSD is a really fascinating way to phrase it. I don't think that that's wrong. Yeah. You can kind of see from that pop psychology standpoint, the symptoms of that you can kind of see in the broader populace, like maybe like a little bit quicker to anger, lack of trust, people kind of retreating. Yeah. And it is really kind of wild. I said about 3/4 jokingly that in the future on social media, there's going to be a conspiracy theory, which of course, I mean, social media, they have to have conspiracy theories, but there'll be one in particular that says the pandemic never happened. And people be like, of course it happened. I lived through it. And they're going to go, really? Well, how come there's not a single Hollywood movie or a Hollywood show where the pandemic occurred? Hollywood is more in tune to what people want than anything. And they have just so obviously made a choice that we're just going to pretend this never happened. Nobody wants to see a television show set in it. Nobody wants a retrospective. Nobody wants a comedy. Just nope. We're just going to pretend this whole year is just gone. No one wants to deal with it.
But who wants to remember that time we shut society down and stacked bodies in refrigerators? And, that was a good laugh, wasn't it? Jeez, I can't wait for World War III. Oh, here it is. Never mind COVID.
Yeah.
And there was the COVID loyalty test, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was kind of the masks, the vaccines, the lockdowns. You kind of settled into what kind of tribe you were depending on what you were doing, and it was pretty obvious, I mean, you had mad aunts taking to Facebook saying the COVID vaccine gave her a venereal disease and all this kind of crack, I mean, I just don't think, Vince, that trauma. I wouldn't listen to me if we were talking about COVID.
Do you listening to yourself regularly, though?
No,
energy defines stuck COVID.
No, I try to avoid it at all costs. Sure, the kids don't even listen to me. Or never mind listen to me.
That's fine. I think we could probably cut it off there because you might be right, but we're getting to run a little bit of a natural experiment because for listeners probably don't know this, but we can actually see through our podcasting platforms how long people listen for and when they start dropping away. So we're going to have a little natural experiment, which we can come back to online and maybe in the next kind of news roundup and see if we see accelerated people just as soon as the word COVID comes out of my mouth, just people reaching for their phone and just ending the episode. So we'll get a little experiment off that.
I will say this, Vincent, right? And I think that with the trauma there with it, right? So I don't think people don't want to talk about it because it was frightening. It was highly politicized.
Yeah.
And, kind of humiliating because deep down, we know if there was another pandemic, we'd act the exact same way again.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. So
probably with just worse memes.
yeah.
So I'm Tull from the Irish Politics Newsletter.
And I'm Vince Martin from Wall Street, Maine. Thank you as always for listening. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.